Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioner Hall. You got that in stereo.
I beg your pardon?
I said you got good morning in stereo.
I sure did, didn't I? It's quite a welcome.
Chairman Fishman, are you out there in virtual land?
He is out there.
You say he is? Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, you know, Commissioner Maestas, I suppose we could start. You want to give him a few?
That's, we're a minute after.
All right, let's get started then. Welcome everyone to the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission regular weekly meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order. Mike Smith, roll call, please.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Here.
Commissioner Hall.
Here.
Commissioner Byrd.
Still a present.
Commissioner Maestas.
I'm here.
And Commissioner Fishman. We have 4 commissioners present. That constitutes a quorum for purposes of the Open Meeting Act.
Just arrived. This is Commissioner Fishman.
Oh,
Good
good.
morning.
All right, Mr. Chair, take it over.
Okay,
We're
I
at Pledge of
apologize.
Allegiance.
Pardon? Oh, Pledge of Allegiance. I'll say it this morning, and Cynthia, you get to say the state pledge
Okay.
because you're
Well,
such expertise last week. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, especially Commissioner Byrd.
Yes, sir.
I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
On to consideration and approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the agenda unless.
Commissioners, I'm sorry, Commissioner Hall, to interrupt.
Fine.
I will have to remove one of my items from the agenda. I'll have to remove case 21-00246 TRM. There was a late filed motion in that case, and I'll bring it back to the commission next week.
Okay. I will move that agenda with that amendment.
Second.
And Mike, please take the roll.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I had to mute myself before. Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman.
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas. Commissioner Maestas.
I said aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
The agenda is approved as modified by a vote of 5-0.
And introduction of special guests, Sarah.
Commissioner Maestas has some special guests this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm really pleased to announce that we have received another Solar Innovator Fellow. And before I have her say a few words, I just want to commend Commissioner Heinrich's office for hearing our concerns regarding the need for additional advisory staff, especially on our side of the organizational chart. Also, and I think it speaks to the job that Arthur O'Donnell has done in critical rulemaking issues such as the interconnection manual update, community solar, and others. And so, so I think this is very timely as we enter into the formal rulemaking process for community solar, as we also begin addressing a lot of the grid modernization issues that we're dealing with, as a state. And so this is really, really great news. Let me just say a few things about Mary Jane Parks. She will start on November 8th, and her term will be for a year. Mary Jane has a master's degree from the University of Chicago, studying organizational management and data analysis. She will conduct applied research in an area related to the integration of solar energy into the electricity grid, as well as engaging the necessary stakeholders within the broader community to develop innovative solutions. So if Mr. Chair, I'd like to invite Miss Mary Jane Parks to come up and say a few words. Why don't you sit here, because you're within the... Floor's yours, and welcome aboard.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mastis, and thank you, Commissioners. I'm Mary Jane Parks, and I look forward to helping New Mexico with its solar innovations, especially those tied to grid modernization and carbon independence. I have a 30-year energy career, and I am looking forward to this opportunity.
Great. Any questions for Mary Jane? And I want to let everybody know she hails here from Santa Fe, and she's actually here, obviously here in the hearing room with her husband, Don. So we have some talent here locally that's willing to help move our state forward in this energy transition.
So I do have a question. Mary Jane, you said 30 years in the energy industry. Could you just give us a quick thumbnail of what's that's been?
Yes, hi, thank you. I worked about 15 years with small local utilities in Southern California, and about 15 years with new renewable energy companies, helping them to raise investor dollars to demonstrate through R&D their new technology. That was offshore wind in a project in Portugal that became commercial in 2017, 2018 timeframe, and also worked on offshore wave energy development in pre-commercial stage.
Terrific, thank you.
Thank you.
And I, for one, am looking forward to eventually seeing your face. What a way to get introduced.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Commissioner Hall.
Well, I would just like to say welcome. Since you're local, Mary Jane, you are aware of our agency's tasks ahead of us. I'm sure you've been aware of that. And I just want to express my gratitude for your willingness to join us in our difficult time here with a heavy caseload and heavy rulemaking jobs ahead of us, and you are most welcome. And I'm very excited to have someone of your caliber with us. So welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Maestas.
And I also just wanted to mention that typically the Department of Energy's Solar Innovator Program will not award more than one fellow per state. So they have clearly made New Mexico an exception. They really heard our compelling needs for additional staff resources as we enter, I think, a new phase, as I mentioned, in our transition to a clean energy future. So again, I really commend Senator Heinrich's office and Department of Energy and the Oak Ridge Institute, which actually directly manages the Solar Innovator Program.
Senator Heinrich was, I guess, a terrific help in doing this. Is that correct?
Yes, he was. I think when we made the ask, it maybe, within 2 weeks of our request, convened a meeting with appropriate Department of Energy officials and Oak Ridge Institute officials to discuss the needs regarding our agency and the need for additional staff resources. And so I'd say that was maybe about 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago. But once the referral was made to Oak Ridge, I was interviewed and Mary Jane was interviewed. So there was a formal online application process followed by interviews of me and of Mary Jane Parks. So it was a very thorough issue, and we made it with a successful outcome. And as I mentioned again, her term is a year. It'll be November 8th of this year to November 7th of next year. The typical term for these fellows is 2 years.
Correct. And I guess what I point out to everybody is between Arthur and Mary Jane, we don't have the most typical candidates, if you will, or people filling these fellowships. Most of them come out of school or much less experienced. And the DOE has been very helpful in letting us stretch the boundaries, if you will, of the program to bring on such experienced folks. Because to a large degree, they view it as a training to have people permanently stay with the agencies. So anyway, I think we've really hit the jackpot here. So that's terrific.
That's all I had, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. One other question from me. Do you have any strategy about how we're going to be using Mary Jane's talents? How you expect her to work with the commission as a whole, or you're still working that stuff out?
Yes, we're all interested.
Well, I think the application of her skill set will be in community solar, helping finish with interconnection and some of the grid mod efforts. So, I hate to say she'd be like a rover, but I don't like that term. But I think that she'll be, working with all of us. She'll be under kind of my direct kind of mentorship, if that's even possible. But she'll be there to assist, the entire commission with these specific efforts.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Commissioner Hall.
I would say there's ample opportunity for overlap insofar as a lot of these issues are, I hate to say it, interconnected. So I'm sure we'll have plenty of work that she'll find very stimulating, and that will be very helpful for us in meshing our rules that we're working on in a very, hopefully very clear and productive way.
So Mr. Chair, really, I think she'll be assisting with the integration of distributed energy resources into the grid, which is a great segue into the presentation that we have coming up from Renewable Energy Industry Association.
Well, thank you and welcome aboard, Mary Jane. We need you and really look forward to having you take us through the busy year ahead of us. And with that, let's move on to the next item on the agenda. I believe that's the presentation, right, Sarah?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
And
no public comment?
no public comments today.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
And
Go ahead.
I was just going to say I've made the three of them, the three presenters co-hosts so that they can share their screen as needed.
Terrific. Jim and Tayoko, please come on board.
All right, well, thank you very much. And we are ready to present. And I'm going to share my screen. Give me one moment. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, 1 second here. I got to move something. Okay. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, the Public Regulation Commissioners, for the opportunity. And also, I'll just take a moment to say that we look very much forward to the contributions from Mary Jane Parks. I think that's going to be super. My name is Jim Desjardins, and I'm the Executive Director of the Renewable Energy Industries Association of New Mexico. We've been around since 2004. We have approximately 35 members, are fairly diverse group of folks, local solar installation companies, developers, manufacturers, distributors. We have a major credit union that's a member, and Central New Mexico Community College is a member. And we, our major areas of focus are permitting, the state legislature, and the Public Regulation Commission. And so I'm going to be starting off the presentation, and I'll also be doing the final couple slides. In between, we're going to have Ron Flex Davidson. He's an attorney based out of Santa Fe, also a business owner, and has a long history of being involved in large-scale wind and solar development. And Tayoko Sedgwick. Tayoko is president of Positive Energy Solar, a longtime local solar company, and also president of RIA. So RIA is the acronym we're known by. So there's been a couple of key transformative events that we're going to focus on in our presentation. The first of which is solar power, which is now the lowest cost of generation. And one of the unique things about solar power is that you can install solar behind the meter on homes and businesses, and that essentially gives people the ability to self-generate. And we also believe that this is very important as to how it fits into distributed energy, distributed energy resources known as DER, and that'll be a major focus of our presentation. Another major event is electric vehicles and how they're vastly being adopted. And I'm sure most of the people here saw the news that Hertz announced they're going to buy 100,000 Teslas. So really, I think we're right in the process of electrical vehicles becoming mainstream. But one of the things that this is going to do is that it's going to increase the electrical usage significantly. And some of our data that we looked at suggests that it could actually double the amount of electricity being used. And I might add that this, depending upon how it's addressed, could have a profound impact on the duck curve that a lot of people are associated with, which basically means that as solar energy production is going down, electrical usage is going up. So right here on this slide, a couple takeaways are, first of all, we're showing that dramatic reduction in solar over the last 10 years, which makes solar production, it suggests right here that it's really on par with wind. And of course, if you do a deep dive, you can get different data on that. Slightly cheaper than natural gas. And of course, I think folks know that natural gas is expected to go up significantly in Europe and quite possibly here as well. So this could change. Price of coal is going up and it's really no longer cost effective. And of course, there's carbon emissions from coal that are becoming more and more of a concern. And then nuclear, which is a great base load and it's clean, but as you can see here, it's expensive and it's also difficult to insure. And of course, there's the issue with the spent fuel rods with nuclear. So I'm going to let Ron take it over from here. And I'm going to advance the slide for Rob.
Thank you, Jim. And as Jim indicated, I've had over 20 years in the renewable energy sector, the private sector. I've built over 2,000 megawatts of renewable energy, mostly wind and solar. I live here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and have been very much involved now recently in the development of the renewable energy industry going forward, both in the United States and in New Mexico. As Jim indicated, there's some real basic facts, climate change, and now the importance and value of solar and electric vehicles that are just going to change everything in New Mexico and around the world. And there are many, some who don't accept this, but the reality is, as Abe Lincoln once said, where you stand often depends on where you sit. And so let me talk about the basic facts. As Jim talked about solar, about electric vehicles. We've now accepted that solar is the cheapest, one of the cheapest forms of electric generation. Electric vehicles are just starting to show up in our neighborhoods. And so we haven't yet quite grasped perhaps how cheap and how valuable these are. Electrical vehicles are now less costly than fossil fuel vehicles. And on a fuel basis, significantly lower, about 5 cents a mile for the cost of an electric vehicle compared to 15 cents or more for a gas vehicle. And this results in savings to the customer here in New Mexico. If we go to a 50% penetration rate of over $900 million per year. So it's just a huge impact that we're going to see. And with the new range that's being provided by these electric vehicles, as high as 400 miles per charge. I own one that gets 278 miles here in Santa Fe. Each time I charge it up, it takes about 3 hours at home. If I do it on the road on a supercharger, it takes about 20 minutes. And here you see that the Bloomberg New Energy estimates that in 2035, over half the vehicles will be electric. I personally believe that this is way too conservative. We're going to get to over 50% here in New Mexico in this decade. Next slide, please. And as Jim indicated, if we move to just 50% electric vehicles, this will require an additional 2,000 megawatts of new solar and wind with the Energy Transition Act requirements of moving to 100% renewable. That's all going to come from solar and wind, and that'll double essentially the electric capacity in this state. As you all know, this doesn't even include some of the other ways that electrification will manifest itself. Obviously, if we do more than 50% electric vehicles, if we electrify our homes and appliances, this will also go up. And this has great impacts in New Mexico with this transition, even with just a 50% electric vehicle penetration. We expect to see 9,000 new jobs in New Mexico, direct jobs. This is about $6 billion of new investment and about $400 million in new state and local tax receipts. Next slide, please. Let's move now to what does this mean for distributed energy resources? What you see on this graph or this slide is that most of the generation of electric power has been done in utility scale processes. And so these are the large central station, but there is still been a significant portion, in this only about 5 or 6% in distributed energy resources. But it's our view that there's great reasons why this needs to change as we go forward and why it will be of benefit for this to change. Next slide, please. So first, make sure everybody's on the same page here. What are distributed energy resources? These consist of the local rooftop or ground mounted solar arrays that in great part the Renewable Energy Industry Association represents the providers of these kinds of installations. In the future, it's going to see a lot more electric battery storage facilities. Obviously, we know solar is generally available during the day and not at night. With the new rules passed or legislation passed, it will include community solar, and several of the parties that are interested in that are members of RIA. It will also include smart buildings and microgrids, and then finally, as indicated, electrical vehicle charger stations. So we're going to see a change of how DER is rolled out here in the state as we double the amount of electricity that we generate here in the state. Next slide, please. And then finally, to make clear, the Renewable Energy Industry Association, as Jim indicated, has a number of, I think over 30, he mentioned, members at this point in time. These members and others who are involved in this work have so far installed over 30,000 customer installations. So there's a great acceptance of this kind of generation, and it has been working successfully. There's over 70 small and mid-sized businesses that are here in New Mexico that are providing this kind of work, and they in turn employ over 2,000 direct local employees. And this has meant that over 200 megawatts have so far been installed through these kind of small arrays, generating over $500 million in local investment. And this is only with 5% of the current electrical generation coming from DER, from distributed energy resources. Next, please. We're arguing that we should probably go to 25% distributed energy resource over the next 10 years. And I think Tayoko will get into more detail on that, but just to let you know what that means over 900 megawatts of new solar distributed energy resources. That would create over another 1,600 of new direct jobs in New Mexico. It's 1.6 billion in new investment in New Mexico and over 80 million in direct state and local tax receipts. So this is a successful business that's played an important role in the past, and we see this as being a dramatically beneficial role and expanded role in the future. Thank you, Tayoko.
Thanks. Thanks, Ron, Jim. And good morning, commissioners. Really feeling gratitude for having this opportunity to talk about a really important topic. My background, I've been in the solar industry since 2004. I was educated in New Mexico in the Four Corners area at a school that back in 2003 was the only school in the United States that offered courses on solar photovoltaic installations and design. This first slide needs a little bit of an introduction. The foundation of grid modernization is a framework that looks at all of the parts, and it breaks away from the traditional ways in which utilities model in their IRP and their processes. This is the first model of its kind to optimize all of the elements: central generation, transmission and distribution systems, DER, climate and weather data, and so on. It's the most comprehensive IRP model that has been run on this energy transition. And the goal of this model was to reach 95% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2050. And this addresses all fossil fuels. So just to add an important side note, FERC recognizes the value of DER and passed FERC order, we call it 2x4, which is 4 twos, allowing DER to participate in the wholesale markets through aggregation. And their intent was to remove the barriers to DER and to level the playing field with utility power, creating a more competitive environment. So this is really foundational too. And if you look at this table here, basically, in terms of percent, it doesn't make sense for a utility to invest in generation to serve the last 10% of peak loads, where this would be a perfect opportunity to use DER and local storage to address this. And the result would be to reduce central generation by 16%. So this model provides the integrated picture of DER as a key part of the energy transition and results in DER levels about 10 times higher. Next slide, Jim. This was back one. This was the result of that model, and basically it identified that there's about $500 billion with savings over a business as usual utility scale solar model, and it would result in higher employment. Clearly, DER generates about 30 times more jobs, and I've seen that kind of data in our own operations. And it delays central facilities and transmission to focus on distribution and learning to utilize DER in the system. And it becomes the beginning of creating a two-way grid, which is foundational. So this model integrates DER and storage as a resource. And the important bottom point is this provides local and small business opportunities. And frankly, in terms of innovation, this is where it happens at the ground floor with small businesses developing products that can be used as part of this important energy transition. Next slide. And this is about resiliency. The increased demands for resiliency is heightened by what happened in Texas and California. And customers want more independence. We have 19 closed circuits in PNM territory right now, and the customers are asking us to take them off grid. Their technology is available to do that. And the important question is that what we want? Is that where
Tycho, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just to be sure everyone understands, would you quick explain what closed circuits mean and what it means to people wanting to get solar?
Sure. I will basically, PNM has a calculation for determining that a circuit is saturated with solar, either distributed or large solar behind a substation. And that calculation that they make results in their closing the circuit to any more DER. No more solar is allowed behind that circuit. And right now there's no plan to change that circuit and upgrade it to allow for more solar. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you. Just
next slide. So there's a person named Christoph Lorenzo, and he's was in the regional grid development in California, had a leadership position. He is a thought leader that described this grid modernization as an integrated and complex, diverse and resilient system, just like nature. And so the grid of the future flows two ways, and really important demand growth is shaped to enable electrification of all fossil fuels. So an example would just be car charging and requiring some sort of structure and incentives to charge at the right time. This is just a really important concept around this, because ultimately, if we're going to move to 100% renewables, the ETA only covered about half. We're going to double the grid again, and we're going to need to cover both heating and cooling and the balance of transportation that we didn't cover in this. Please, next slide. So what do we want as an industry, as an important player in this important decision-making? We believe we need to pull out all the stops for this energy transition. We cannot have obstacles to preventing the development of renewable resources and the infrastructure to do that. So these are some key requirements that we identified to help DER, maintaining the current rules for net metering and customer charges. And an important thing here is for non-exporting systems now, there is a capability that exists for both batteries and the inverter technology that will limit or non-export the excess power or the power in a battery to the grid.
Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt, but I wonder if Tayoko could please explain for those who might not be aware, what does exporting or non-exporting mean?
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah.
Right now, a battery system provides battery power just to the loads in the home. It will not export. A typical PV system today that's interconnected in the grid will export the excess power onto the grid. And this creates what's famously called the duck curve, where you get an excessive amount of backfeeding going onto the grid in the distribution system during the peak sun hours of 10 to 2. And so these non-exporting systems are particularly designed, and there's tax incentives in order to just take the power, excess power that's generated during the daytime, and save it for night and mornings when the sun's not out. And so they are, in order to be eligible for the tax credit, they must be charged by solar, and they are not designed to export onto the grid. Inverter technology is now capable of either limiting the export or not exporting at all. And this happened because in Hawaii, they had too much solar on the grid and they had to limit it. So the inverter manufacturers all develop products to make that work.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, I just want to seek clarification again. So Tayoko, let me ask you a question. You mentioned battery and you mentioned new inverter technology. They're both capable of preventing export. Can you just, well, are you saying that photovoltaic systems that are also accompanied by a battery can store the electricity in the battery and then put it on into the grid in a controlled way, and then also those new inverters can limit or prevent the flow of spontaneously generated electricity from panels onto the grid even without the batteries? Is that true?
Yes, that is true.
Okay.
they're designed that they're capable of doing that now. They're doing that in Hawaii and some saturated places in California where there might be limits on the on this distribution system because of distribution upgrades are delayed. So yes, you've described that correctly. And we believe that the grid modernization requires these capabilities to be an important resource in shifting that duck curve excess exporting to peaks where it's needed, as it was shown in the previous two slides, where it basically shaves off that peak load at whatever that time might be that could be designated by utility. And so to finish these, the other important thing is that for a net metering program or for a transformer capacity, non-exporting storage systems should not be included in calculating the total AC rating. And again, right now, that's an important clarification to advance DER. And then in terms of interconnection, a utility cannot
Excuse me,
prevent.
Mr. Chair, I want to ask one more question. Can you
Go ahead.
explain the importance, Mr. Tayoko, of AC rating or the significance of that for purposes of explaining the non-export energy in relation to it?
Okay, yeah. The PV panels generate DC energy, and a battery is typically DC energy. And so there's an inverter that converts that to AC. Typically, the DC capacity can be higher or lower than the AC capacity, depending on the design and the circumstances. What really counts is AC, alternating current. That's what the utilities use to determine whether there's a capacity limit on a feeder. And so they're using the AC rating of all of the inverters to calculate the capacity utilization for an individual, a transformer, and hosting capacity. So finally, the interconnection, as I mentioned, a utility cannot prevent investments in energy efficiency on closed circuits, but right now they are discriminating against DER, and they're preventing customers from connecting solar to reduce their energy bill and become more self-sufficient. So we need to have non-discrimination. We need to have a more objective determination of when a line or a feeder is closed. We did not get clear or transparent information about that when it was requested from Commissioner Hall. And so this is really an important thing. And we also believe that utilities should proactively forecast the distribution system upgrades to meet the forecasted growth of DER or loads, and not react after a circuit's closed. So those are the key things that we believe will promote a healthy modern grid for the future. Give it back to you, Jim.
Jim, are you there?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Okay, let me go back to where I started from. First of all, thank you, Tayoko. Thank you, Ron. Basically, just some key points in closing. We believe that distributed energy resources are going to play a fundamental part in our energy transition, and that's because it enables self-generation for customers to choose their sources of energy. The decentralization that DER provides and the resiliency, the ability to store energy for in case the grid is down, and the ability to dispatch, as Tayoko was mentioning, that newer technologies enable us to do that. And that's really just invaluable. The economic development and jobs in local communities is also a huge benefit. And finally, it's more cost effective. So that's basically our conclusion on this. And just one quick more slide. Thank you so much. There are additional slides in the presentation that we didn't go through that provides additional detailed information. There's my contact information there for follow-up, and we are open for questions.
Thank you. And thank you for doing this in front of the full commission. I know there'd been some initial requests to talk individually to commissioners, but we just kind of like as a process for all commissioners to hear it at the same time and be able to ask questions together. So thank you for accommodating us.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioners, yeah, go with questions.
Well, I just wanted to mention that, the issue of circuits that are by that I mean feeder lines that deliver electricity to people's homes or small businesses has been an issue that has arisen in our present interconnection rulemaking. But it's certainly an issue that everybody needs to be aware of in general, because it can have a really adverse effect on the development of not only household solar energy, rooftop solar systems, but the development of the transportation electrification programs, as they mentioned earlier. And so I think it just became, I'm really glad these individuals are coming before the commission and explaining it this way, because it's an issue that is really important for our state going forward. And while this would have become something we would talk about more on the commission in the future, once we get to the point of a notice of proposed rulemaking in that proceeding, which we'll be filing in a couple of weeks now. I'm just very glad that they came and sort of laid out the whole scenario of what's happening in the distribution grid right now. And it's very challenging. And I think this is something that the commission needs to get right. And, as I mentioned to you before, I think it's very important for us to drill down on the distribution system right now. We should be looking at that in terms of further rulemakings, which I've also discussed with you. And I would like to bring to the attention of the commission in the future, probably next week. But sorry about this. I got to turn this, something's going crazy here. Anyhow, I just wanted to express my appreciation for the effort made by these folks to present the issue in a way that's a little bit more understandable. Although I think some of this was maybe a little bit more technical than some of the people here, but including me, actually, some of the issues are still very challenging to get a grasp on. But basically, it boils down to whether we can have more distributed control, personal control over the types of electricity that we get to consume, and the implications for a better economic outcome for consumers as well. So thanks once again, and I'll stop there.
Other commissioners?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Commissioner Byrd.
thank you. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for your presentation. I've mentioned this before, and Jim, you kind of brought it up, so I'm going to mention it again. Early in the presentation, you had said that although nuclear is although nuclear is clean, there is an issue with the spent rods, and that's absolutely true. Been around for years, decades now, and we still don't know what to do with all that waste. That picture in my background is wind turbine blades being landfilled because we don't know what to do with the waste. Batteries, although they can be regenerated, current technology is cost prohibitive. Transporting them is concerning because of their potential to ignite. And although Tesla says they're going to 100% recycle, they currently aren't being recycled. There was an article in Science, I believe it was back in May, where they're trying to figure out what to do with them. And we always talk about how technology for the new energy sources is growing in leaps and bounds. I would like to know what we're going to do with the waste. We're generating tons of waste, and we don't have a source for it yet. And I know 50 years ago, they thought they would have something to do with the spent rods, and we still don't. So what guarantees do we have that we're going to have a place to go with our new wastes? How much thought, time, and energy, and I know other people are doing it, and maybe that's just not in your wheelhouse, because there are universities and governments and everybody trying to find out what we do with all this. But how much of a concern is this mounting waste going to be in 10 years when they're estimating something like 125 million cars, I think, that are electric versus the 10 million now in 10 or 15 years? If we don't have a home for that waste in 5 years, we're going to have a serious problem on our hands with all that waste. And I just want to know, do you guys have anything to do with that end of this problem? There's problems on both ends, and you guys are working on your stuff, but I'm just curious, what do you guys know? Is there any words of encouragement? Thanks.
Let me speak to that because actually right now we are recycling our modules and we are planning to even set up a repository for all installation companies that go out and replace modules, so that they could come to one place, and we ship them to an organization in Arizona that recycles them. That's the biggest amount. That's the biggest piece of waste. The inverter technology is another one that's creating waste, and electronic waste, which again can be recycled. We don't have that figured out yet, and the manufacturers in some cases are, and in some cases aren't. And so our industry is focused around that from start to finish. How are we going to address this? And it is a very important question, Commissioner Byrd, and we are working on that. I don't know if you have any more to add, Jim.
I appreciate that, Tayoko, and I didn't know you were doing that, but that's great. And I was just going to say that, recycling is just an issue in our society, and I think basically there's a concept called cradle to grave, and our industry is embracing that and trying to work in that way.
Commissioner Byrd, any follow-up on that?
No, I think they answered adequately. It's a hard answer to come up with right now. There's just not an easy solution for this problem. But lots of minds around the world trying to figure it out. And I'm just curious what they had seen or heard, because like everything else, technology is changing every month, every week.
I'll just follow up real quickly on that. Is, I think Commissioner Byrd raises an important question. And, I'd love it if you guys give some thought to policy ideas that might be adopted by the legislature to encourage recycling and encourage cost-effective recycling and reuse of these materials. And I think Commissioner Byrd is, on the right track in pointing out we shouldn't forget to be doing that while we're going forward with this. And it seems to me there are ways to do this that might be helpful to you all in what you do and might get in the way, and you need to give us some guidance.
Thank you, Commissioner Fishman. We appreciate those points. Very well spoken. Thank you.
Okay. Any other commissioner comments, questions? I'm going to just ask one other question. And actually, Arthur, are you still with us? Arthur O'Donnell?
Yes, Commissioner, I'm here.
Terrific. We were, we've been talking with the DOE about some additional work, and they wanted to do some work forecasting about how we can meet our renewable and clean energy goals. And perhaps they would be willing to do a study for us. Do you see any tie-in here about how we're planning to go forward with the distribution grid and what DOE might be able to provide in terms of analysis and cost of going forward with the grid, or is that a separate topic?
Okay, you're breaking up a little bit. You're breaking up a little bit, so I hope that you can hear me. The Department of Energy has recently opened up a new program for revolving requests for state technical assistance that goes beyond what they previously offered. And as you know, we've been working with the National Community Solar Partnership and the laboratories, especially the National Renewable Energy Lab, on a couple of discrete projects. I think that they would be very interested in hearing a proposed request for something that fits in with their larger goals now. And for instance, Department of Energy Secretary Granholm just announced a desire to have 400 solar communities, right, to really spread distributed energy resources around the country. So we can probably craft something and put it in and see if we can get some work. I'll just say that they are very interested in discrete, easily managed projects, right? Not big comprehensive work plans, but I think that we can probably come up with something that fits our needs and fits their needs.
So I would just encourage the RIA folks to get together with Arthur and now with Mary Jane and see if you can put together some ideas, and maybe we can further. New Mexico is great at using federal resources. We should continue that tradition, and would just invite you guys to work with Arthur and Mary Jane and see if we can put something together.
Definitely, we would look forward to that.
Okay, any other commissioner questions, comments? Okay, let's move on. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, commissioners. Bye-bye.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, we've got consent action items, and anybody have recommended amendments, changes to that before Michael reads?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Commissioner Hall.
if there are no changes to the consent agenda, I move to approve it.
I will second. And Mike, would you please read what's there and call the roll?
Commissioners, the consent action items include case 21-00247 TRM in the matter of the application of Town of Vaughan Ambulance Service for reissuance of certificate number 12716 to provide ambulance service. It's a potential order regarding the application for reissuance. Utility matters are case 20-00099 UT in the matter of applications for 2021 broadband program support from the State Rural Universal Service Fund as per Rule 1711-1031 NMAC. It's a potential two orders, potential order regarding Roosevelt County Rural Telephone Cooperative Inc.'s request for initial disbursement for Highway 202 project, and a potential order regarding Sierra Communication Inc.'s request for initial disbursement for Turf Drive project. The next final case is 21-00258 UT in the matter of amendments to the State Rural Universal Service, the State Rural Service Fund Rule 171110 NMAC to conform rule to 2021 legislation. It's a potential order opening docket and requiring staff input. I will take the roll. Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas.
Commissioner Maestas, your mic doesn't work when you do that. Nope, nothing. You look good doing it though. Just put a thumbs up for aye. Still can't hear you. There's his eye, Mike.
That's an aye.
Right hand is aye. We'll count that as an aye for Carl's benefit. Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman.
Aye.
The consent action item matters are approved by a vote of 5-0.
Okay, on to regular action items. And we're on 21-112-UT in the matter of the Commission's adoption of rules pursuant to the Community Solar Act. And Russell and Art, please take it away.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm told that, Commissioner Maestas would like to kick off the discussion, but I see he stepped away for a moment. I guess he
I saw a fight start out between him and Miguel, so give him a minute.
Okay.
Agreed.
And Art is here to answer any questions about the substance of the rule, of the proposed rule.
You all hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Mr. Chair, if I would, I just wanted to kick this off. Our state's road to community solar that brings us to where we're at today has been long and arduous. It's taken place over the last 5 years or so with numerous legislative attempts to enact community solar. And the work group that was convened, I think in 2020, really kind of set the groundwork for the passage of the Community Solar Act that was signed earlier this year by the governor. I think today signifies a culmination of a very robust pre-rulemaking stakeholder engagement process that's led to the development of the Stratogen report that really essentially documents all the input provided by the 50 or so stakeholders. And so there's a lot of information for all of you commissioners, as you can see. And we still have a ways to go as we kick off the formal rulemaking process. But I just wanted to thank, the entire community of advocates and stakeholders in participating in our pre-rulemaking process. And thanks Stratagen for their work in presiding over the process and then developing this final report. There are a number of issues in the legislation that has to be addressed through the rulemaking process. And while we had a robust discussion around those primary issues, we didn't achieve clear consensus in all of them. And so we as a commission, during the formal rulemaking process, will call upon the community again in a more formal fashion to address a lot of those unresolved issues, and they're highlighted in the exhibit, and Russell and Arthur will speak to it. But I just wanted to kick this off, Mr. Chair, and just mention that this has been a long and winding road. That should be in a song. And so this is really the important part, and where we have to step up, and the advocates and stakeholders have to step up and hopefully reach some consensus. And as we all know, consensus is you're not always going to get what you want, but we need to keep moving forward because we don't have too much time, too much float time in this formal rulemaking timeline in order to meet the statutory mandate to finalize a final community solar rule by April 1st of next year. And so we have yet again another challenge before us. And as many of you know, we have other rulemakings that we've yet to tend to, and we've essentially put most of those aside to focus on community solar. And so I think this agency has demonstrated that priority to get this done and meet that mandate. And I want to thank the internal PRC Community Solar Action Team for really stepping up and helping to bring us to this point. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'm going to turn it over to Russell to really explain what's before us today. Thank you.
Okay, so commissioners, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see here. So I'll just briefly discuss the procedure. It's like the procedure in other rulemakings with one difference. This proposed order issuing the NOPR, which is the notice of proposed rulemaking, would begin, as I said, as Commissioner Maestas referred to, the formal process. And we had a long informal process that was not subject to the State Rules Act, the requirements of that act. Now the NOPR starts the formal process under the State Rules Act, a formal comment period, a formal hearing, et cetera. The one thing that is unusual, as opposed to other rulemakings, at least that I've handled, or rulemakings that I've seen so far at the commission, is that in addition to the proposed rule itself, which is Exhibit A to the order, there is the document titled Additional Issues to be Addressed in the Formal Comment Process, which is Exhibit B, as Commissioner Maestas referred to. That specifically asks questions and raises issues that that we weren't able to get to either resolve or get to even reach in the informal proceedings and the workshop and work group process. But I'm informed that the federal notices of proposed rulemaking often include, or at least sometimes include, this sort of addendum to the proposed rule, raising other potential issues. So I think it's a practice everyone will understand, and it's should not be a problem anyway. The notice itself refers to both the proposed rule, the notice of the NOPR itself, which will be published in the Register and the New Mexico Register, and two newspapers, actually refers to both the proposed rule and the additional issues, and tells people where they can find those on the website. They'll be together, and it actually says that people should consider those two documents together, so that they will have comments that address all of the whole enchilada. Let's see. So there is a comment schedule, of course, that is set within this order. which will be a little bit expanded from the usual one round of comments and one hearing, expanded a little bit. Usually we have an initial round of comments, or one round of comments consisting of initial comments and then response comments, and then we have a public hearing. And because this is a little bit more complicated, well, quite a bit more complicated than many of our rulemakings, there'll be an initial comment period, or a set of initial comments, then response comments, then a public hearing, which will be limited to those who have not made written comments. This is a limitation we used to place quite a bit in the past on public hearings. And I had stopped including that in that limitation in my rulemakings, because a lot of times commissioners would come to a public hearing, want to ask questions of anyone, whether they had submitted written comments or not. This time I have included that language because this is we're going to have many comments, many written comments, and probably a lot of oral comments at the public hearing. So I think restricting it to the public hearing comments to those who have not made written comments makes a lot of sense here. So the initial comments would be due December 9th, response comments December 29th. There would be a public hearing on January 6th. This is a date that obviously that can be changed. There's some room here for that. If there are commissioners who have conflicts there and who would like to attend, but via Zoom. Of course, this is going to be via Zoom. So that's a date that all of the commissioners might want to look at right now, if you're interested in being part of that public comment hearing. We would like to avoid having a quorum, at least in terms of commissioners speaking, but of course, all commissioners can listen in, and 2 commissioners can participate. That would avoid a quorum issue. So the extra step that it will be taken in this comment period that is not usual in our rulemakings is a set of reply comments after the hearing. And I think accidentally in my memo, I call them response comments due January 21st. That should be reply comments. And then the NOPR it's referred to as reply comments, because there's initial, then response, then the hearing, then reply. Okay, so I think you're clear on that. Another couple of other things that are unusual for an order issuing NOPR is that there are findings. I don't know if I discussed this in the memo, so I'm going to go to the order itself. I'm not sure I included this in the memo. I'm going to the order now just because I'm not sure I discussed this part of the memo. There was a specific requirement in the Act that in the Community Solar Act, that in the rulemaking process, the commission would solicit input from state agencies, public utilities, low-income stakeholders, disproportionately impacted communities, et cetera. That was a specific, usually there aren't specific requirements for a rulemaking process except the general requirements that are in the State Rules Act. So this order addresses that issue specifically. It would make a finding, the commission would make a finding that the team has satisfied those quote unquote stakeholder outreach requirements of the Act, and that the formal proceedings will continue to promote those stakeholder outreach goals, which is something that Commissioner Manastis also referred to. That's paragraph 10 of the order. Sorry, I don't think it referred to it in the memo, but that is something a little different from most orders issuing NOPR. And of course, with regard to the additional issues to be discussed, there is a paragraph of the order that discusses in paragraph 7, it discusses the informal proceedings that were done, Stratagens report and their role in that, and the working groups, very extensive informal proceedings, as Commissioner Manastis referred to, but paragraph 8 then discusses how, despite the best efforts of the team, Stratagen, and the stakeholders, there is insufficient time and insufficient resources to formulate a comprehensive proposed rule, thus the need for Exhibit B, which is the additional issues to be commented upon. So I think that, one thing I would like to say is this schedule is a schedule that I devised, and we do have a little bit of a tight deadline right at the beginning, The NOPR will have to be submitted for publication tomorrow. I think was submitted today, but it have to be approved for publication tomorrow. It's a submittal date for the next publication date of the register, which is November 9th. I think a NOPR, it's quite possible to get that done, to get it approved within 1 day, because a NOPR is a shorter document. It's not a proposed rule that has extensive formatting issues. And I think we'll be able to get it done. If for some reason we don't get the NOPR, the state records office doesn't accept the NOPR tomorrow, then I will put this on next week's agenda for consent agenda for, an order with a revised schedule, because this does depend on getting the NOPR submitted for publication tomorrow. But I think we'll be able to do that. Again, a NOPR is just a 1.5 page document. So with that, I can take any questions on the procedural issues, and Art is available to take questions on the substantive issues concerning the proposed rule.
Chair.
Commissioner Maestas.
Yes, Russell, before you hand it over to Arthur, we're going to have one public hearing. There'll be opportunities for folks to send in written comments, and I think the order explicitly states that if you're going to send in written comments, then there's no need to provide oral comments. But my broader request of you for clarification is that typically in formal rate cases, public comment is not really a part of the evidentiary record. It's only the parties to a case, but this is different in that it's a rulemaking. So can you just explain the relevance and the role that public comments will play during the formal rulemaking process versus a formal hearing examiner or rate case, for example?
Yes. In a rulemaking, there are no parties. There are only persons in general, interested persons. There's one reference. Members of the public is essentially the same. Anyone may file comments or make oral comments. And in a rulemaking, there's no evidentiary record. There's no sworn testimony taken. The hearing isn't as in a hearing as in a hearing with witnesses and cross-examination. It's again just more comments. So there are no parties, there are no evidence. There are just members of the public, interested persons who don't have to intervene or become parties in any way. They can just submit their comments according to the schedule. They're just interested persons and comments, no parties and evidence. Now,
Mr. Chair, excuse me, could I just, I hate to interrupt, but I think it's worth saying when Russell mentions that there are no parties, the theory is that in a rulemaking, there's not a dispute necessarily. And so that's why it's you don't have parties in the general sense of being opponents to each other. The idea is that everybody has the same objective, so there's no dispute in that regard. And I think that's always been a very important idea for me in going forward with rulemakings, because that permits everybody to consult among themselves and with anybody, even a commissioner. And it's, a more collaborative process. So I just remember when it was explained to me first, people said there were no parties. I couldn't really understand that, but I can certainly understand a collaborative process, and hopefully it'll move forward this way.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. I mean, a matter that has parties is generally an adjudication, which is an adjudication of the specific rights of usually one particular party, is in our case is usually an applicant, whereas a rulemaking is a policymaking endeavor. So there's no judgment that comes out of it that decides any particular person or company's of rights. So it's just we're listening to the public on matters of policy.
Okay. So Arthur, I think the baton was passed to you.
Well, I'm not responding to any particular question, but I will point out the importance of the stakeholder involvement so far in helping to formulate the terms of the proposed rule that you're considering. That I really didn't know how to approach some of the many issues until we saw the outcome of the discussions. And the Strategy hosted 6 different stakeholder meetings in July, August, and September, and then put out this report on October 15th. And I would commend everyone to read the report. Again, echoing what Commissioner Maestas said, is that we really didn't have time to have proposals to reach consensus on, but there were several areas where there was general agreement or a very strong sentiment among the participants in the stakeholder process that really helped inform the drafting of the rule. That said, there were still a lot of issues that we couldn't get around to just because of time. And that's the other addendum that Russell referred to, which is additional questions. In some cases, those questions try to flesh out some of the elements that were discussed in the stakeholder process, and others are issues that we just didn't get around to. One of the big issues, and I need to point this out to the Commission, is that the Community Solar Act gave the PRC the sole and exclusive authority to administer and enforce the rules and provisions of the Act. However, it did not give us funding, and it did not give us really the resources to do that. And that leads to a very basic question that I raised in the first workshop we had, which is how deeply can the Commission administer this program? And there are essentially 3 options. Does the Commission hire staff in order to be the administrators of this program, or divert current staff? Do we contract with an outside administrator, which is something that other jurisdictions do? Or do we turn administration over to the utilities? That's the number 1 question that the Commission needs to answer for itself. And largely it depends on the availability of resources. If we can get the budget, then we could hire an outside person. If we get the budget, then we could have internal staff. So that's really first and foremost. The other issues that rise to the top really fall into the categories of consumer protection mechanisms, of rate making, especially the calculation and application of what's called a solar bill credit, which is, under this mechanism, people subscribe to these projects. The project energy is given to the utilities for distribution, but the financial issues are between the subscriber, the utility, and the subscribing organization, or the owner and operator of the project. And it's up to the Commission to determine a bill credit mechanism that applies to the monthly bill of the subscribers, so that they can then pay a subscription fee to the developer, who can make some money, and the subscribers see something of a benefit, maybe a cost savings compared to the regular utility service. Now, we have to work that out, and that's a really difficult issue, because the early estimates of the solar bill credit that we got from some of the utilities were as low as 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour, which is not going to give an incentive, right? So part of the questions here are ways to stay within the terms of the Act, but give more flexibility in terms of valuing the solar bill credit. And there's 2 ways to do that. One is by really looking at how the utilities are calculating this. And in one case, when we questioned the utilities' estimate, essentially their solar bill credit estimate doubled, right? So, you know, there's something to be said there, and that has to be worked out in the proceeding. Also, the value of the renewable energy certificate, which is the environmental attributes that are associated with the power that goes through the utility. The utilities get those RECs, but we have to make sure that the subscribers get a full valuation of those RECs. So that's going to be a very important aspect. Another big issue on administration will be the interconnection policies. And as you know, we have a parallel rulemaking that's going to be coming up on interconnection, and the relationship between the rules that we're trying to put into place for interconnection going forward and the ability of community solar projects to connect to the utility system cost effectively are very important. So those are aspects as well. Other things, and I won't go into all the details because you have the materials before you, but also there's market oversight, which is how deeply the commission needs to enforce policies and keep track of the projects. The Community Solar Act specifically states that just because someone is building and operating a project does not make them an electric utility. So that means that our actual enforcement authority is prescribed a little bit, and so we have to figure out. So those are some of the major issues that we face, and I think another big one is the capacity allocation among the utilities. Currently, we're looking at addressable market, which is who are the people that could subscribe to these projects, and that's residential, especially low-income customers, small commercial customers, and entities like schools and municipalities and multifamily housing projects that could all become subscribers. Looking at that, we have an initial preliminary sense that about out of the 200 megawatt cap, 125 megawatt could be developed in PNM territory, 45 megawatts in SPS territory, and 30 megawatts in El Paso territory. Those are numbers still to be refined in the rulemaking, but that gives us an indication of where these projects might be located. And that raises issues themselves. We would really like these projects to be close to their subscribers. That way you avoid any reliance on the transmission system and reduce the amount of distribution assets that have to be applied, thereby reducing costs. So all of these are big issues. We don't have a whole lot of time, but I think we made tremendous progress, both in the stakeholder outreach program, in identifying all these issues, and in the drafting of the rule. And I want to thank Russell very much for taking my scribbled notes and turning them into something that the commission can consider.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Maestas first, and then Commissioner Hall.
I was just going to offer the possibility of maybe Russell hitting the high points in the draft rule, or if you just assume that most commissioners read everything, because there's a lot of information in those agenda attachments, but I think it may help just to go through major parts of the draft rule. I think that Arthur kind of summarized the unresolved issues, but perhaps we could go through the exhibit that lists the kind of the unresolved issues. It's not that long, but I'm just offering that up, Mr. Chair, to my colleagues to see if that would help.
Commissioners, do you feel like we should go through that, or is it something where we'd be ready to go to a vote?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go through a vote myself, but I wouldn't mind if there was a brief, and I would say brief review, but I honestly think Arthur just gave a pretty good, a very good description of the issues they've had to deal with, and I think that's a number remain. I just wanted to comment on something that I noticed Commissioner Maestas said when he teed this item off, where he said that this was a long and winding road, and I would say it's been a pretty short and winding road. I mean, I think this has been a tremendous amount of work that's been covered so far in what is, has turned out to be not that long a time. And I'm not surprised there are issues that are outstanding, and I think it's appropriate the way they're handling them. But I just wanted to compliment Commissioner Maestas and everybody who's worked on this so far, especially Arthur as well, because, there are a lot of issues in this. in this rulemaking, and it's complex. And I just think they've done a fine job so far. So I'm ready to vote. But if anybody else wants to hear a discussion, that's
So Commissioner Byrd and Commissioner Vicente Aguilar, would you guys like to have Russell go through some of the items, or do you feel like you're ready to take a vote on this?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Mr.
Commissioner
Chairman, we're ready. I'm ready to vote.
Okay. I will say that, I read through all the materials, and I thought the rule as it was put together struck a nice balance between not getting too detailed and prescriptive, but clearly laying out what needs to be done, and allowing for the commission to adjust on the fly after a rule is adopted, to make adjustments without having to go back and rewrite the rule. And that it was just a terrific job of laying out all the issues that are before us, and it was just very clear. We just well done. So kudos to everybody who worked on that. And with that, I would move the order. Do we have a second?
Second.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Mike, please take the roll.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
Commissioners, the order is approved by a vote of 5-0.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Maestas.
I just wanted to explicitly call out the agency's Community Solar Action Team and thank them for their work. Not that we're done by any stretch, but I think it's important for everyone to know who is on that team if they don't already know. It's my assistant, Christopher Hall, Russell Fisk, John Reynolds, Sarah Valencia. Did I leave anyone else out? Oh, and then Jonas Armstrong, my previous assistant. I think he was instrumental, I think, in leading the stakeholder engagement process as well. So this is definitely a team effort. And I think it really shows that when we're faced with a challenge as an agency, despite, the lack of resources in certain instances, that we rise up and meet the challenge. And so I just want to commend the Solar Action Team again. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. And once again, thanks to all who worked on it. And Sarah, let's see the agenda again. And thank you, Arthur, and thank you, Russell, for that. Okay, we're on to item 6, 20 double lot 158 UT, and the matter of an inquiry into potential amendments to NMPRC Rule 179572 NMAC relating to the renewable rate energy rider and line loss adjustments. And Judy, please take us through it.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. This matter comes before you in a docket entitled in the matter of an inquiry into potential amendments to NMPRC Rule 17.9.572 and MAC relating to the renewable energy rate riders and line loss adjustments and unresolved issues from case number 19-00296, which is a closed docket, but it was the docket that the Renewable Energy Act amendments to Rule 572 were adopted by final order by the Commission on April 14th. In that docket, on August 5th, 2020, the Commission granted Utility Division staff's motion to bifurcate case number 19-296, and opened this docket, case number 20-00158. In that order, on August 5th, 2020, the commission agreed with utility division staff that there were 2 inquiries regarding the use of renewable energy rate riders and line loss adjustments of those riders, which had been moved from a previous SPS renewable case, 19-00134, had moved those 2 issues into the rulemaking docket of 19-00296. However, on August 5th, 2020, as I stated, the commission agreed with the utility division staff and stated that for the sake of administrative efficiency, those 2 issues should be moved out of the rulemaking docket and into its own separate docket, this one, 20-00158. Because there was a time sensitivity issue about getting a final rule for the Renewable Energy Act amendments. And that the thought was that those 2 issues might bog down the process because they were very significant and important issues. And for that reason, this docket was open. In this docket, there were questions asked on December 2nd, 2020, and there were 9 specific inquiries related to the use of renewable energy rate riders in renewable energy cases and whether those riders should be line loss adjusted. The responses to those 9 inquiries were received on March 3rd, 2020 by the City of Las Cruces, El Paso Electric, Louisiana Energy Services, New Mexico Affordable Reliable Energy Alliance, Occidental Petroleum Limited, PNM, SPS, and staff. The March 3rd responses, all the commenters agreed that there was no statutory requirement for public utilities to recover the costs of renewable energy procured to comply with the renewable portfolio standard through a rate rider. And this order before you would concur with the commenters that there is no statutory requirement for public utilities to recover costs to comply with the RPS requirements through a specific type of rate making process like a rate rider. In the March 3rd responses to those 9 inquiries, there were a split amongst the commenters on the issues of whether or not the renewable energy rate riders provide useful information to the consumers or commission, whether or not they serve a purpose, given that renewable energy is becoming less expensive and becoming a larger percentage of a public utilities energy portfolio, and whether or not they cause confusion to customers regarding rates or actually provide useful information. The order before you would find that that these are reasonable arguments, and these issues should be vetted in a rulemaking docket. And this particular order proposes to convert this previous inquiry docket into a rulemaking docket to propose rule language to address the use of renewable energy rate riders. And I'll elaborate on that more in a minute. This particular order, though, finds that it should not pursue inquiries number 6 and 9 of the December 2nd order based upon administrative efficiency and resources, and should reserve those issues for a future docket if necessary. Just for your information, 6 and 9 stated Could costs be saved and customer charges be reduced by eliminating RPS riders? And that was number 6. And number 9, if the RPS rider is not eliminated in total, should RPS riders be line loss adjusted, as is the fuel and purchase power cost adjustment clause? So this proposed order would not include those particular two issues in this rulemaking. In addition, the commission found that the definition of annual levelized cost of energy should be moved to this docket. Subsequently, on June, after the final order in the rulemaking case 19-00296, on June 16th, 2021, the commission issued an order revising the caption and requiring responses to an additional 8 specific inquiries related to the renewable portfolio standard and financial incentive provisions. On July 30th, the commission received responses from the City of Las Cruces, EPE, NMAREA, OPL, PNM, SPS, and staff. Commenters were split on the issue of whether or not a financial incentive may be used to incentivize the closure of the Four Corners generating station or any other carbon dioxide emitting generating resource. This order before you would find that issue regarding clarifying financial incentives and when they may be awarded should be part of a rulemaking docket. In addition, the July 30th responses were generally supportive of promulgating a definition for average annual levelized cost. And the proposed order before you finds that should be a fairly uncontroversial issue, hopefully, because there was a formula that seemed amenable to many of the commenters. Therefore, in this docket, the commission proposes to change the caption again, and it would be called "In the Matter of Commission Rulemaking Regarding NMPRC Rule 17.9.572, Renewable Energy for Electric Utilities." The 3 issues that the commission would address in this rulemaking docket would be the December 2nd inquiries relating to the recovery of costs of renewable energy procured through a rate rider, and whether or not to gradually transition away from the recovery of costs through a rate rider towards including the recovery of these costs in a rate case. And given the fact that it would be the proposal in this amended rule that will be forthcoming, the commission finds it's not a priority to adjust the rate rider for line losses, since the commission is proposing to gradually transition away from the rate rider. So that's the first issue that would be part of this rulemaking. The second issue would be to define the average annual levelized cost. And the third issue would be to focus in on financial incentive and whether or not a financial incentive may be used to incentivize a closure of Four Corners generating station or any other carbon dioxide emitting generating resource. And I know that this case has had a long and kind of confusing history. I tried to summarize it the best I could, and I stand for questions. Oh, so the proposed order would open the essentially changed this docket into a rulemaking docket for the three issues I just outlined, and stated that it would schedule a workshop, and the workshop would be scheduled for December 2nd at 1:30 p.m. And before the workshop, the commission would send out a proposed rule addressing the three issues I just outlined. And now I stand for questions.
Okay. Commissioner questions?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Hall.
if there are no questions, I will move to approve the order.
Second.
Terrific. Before we vote, I'll just make a couple comments. We've got the Sagamore and the Hale wind facilities that came up that are renewables. And again, there's just all this, in my mind, at least, a lot of confusion around what this rider does. Those two renewable projects are not in any way included in the rider as costs. They're meant to save money. And we kind of got this odd system where if someone decides a renewable might be more expensive, somehow it ends up in a rider. And then if they decide it's cheaper, it gets hidden. And it's just become very confusing to me what this whole rider is supposed to achieve and what anybody's supposed to make of it. And what we want to do is kind of sort through and be sure that it's not arbitrary and be sure that whatever current contracts are in place, that the utilities are still getting fairly compensated, but that we don't go through a huge debate every time there's a renewable energy filing about what the number on this rider should be when, maybe it's just a simple pass-through cost to our fuel and purchase power clause for 95% of this. And we don't have to go through all that debate and angst. So anyway, those are my thoughts on it. And with that, Mike, are there any other comments people would like to make before we take a vote? Okay, Mike, please take the roll.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
Order is approved by a vote of 5-0.
Okay. On to item number 7, 21 Triple 31 UT in the matter of Public Service Company of New Mexico's application for approval of 2 purchase power agreements and an energy storage agreement pursuant to 17.9.551 NMAC, an addendum to the special service contract with Greater Kudu LLC, and amended rider number 49. And Judy, before you take it away, I wanted to thank my assistant, Robert Lundin, for the work he did on the order and sorting out the issues on item number 6 that we just covered. So, Robert, I just wanted to be sure you got acknowledged. Judy, take it away.
Yes, I agree. Thank you, Robert. Very, very helpful. On to case number 21-00031. This matter comes before you today upon the July 28th, 2021 final order, and also upon the filing by PNM on October 1st, 2021, of a notice of filing first amendments to the Sky Ranch Energy Storage Agreement, ESA, and the Sky Ranch Power Purchase Agreement, PPA, which I will refer to as the notice, and a subsequent single signature order of the commission requiring responses dated October 15th, 2021. and upon staff and NMAREA's responses dated October 20th, 2021, and PNM's reply dated October 22nd, 2021. The proposed order would adopt and accept PNM's reply dated October 22nd, 2021, in which PNM, and I'll go through what PNM stated, but first I'd like to let you know what staff and NMAREA stated. NMAREA stated that it appeared to them that PNM intended by filing the notice to implement, it did not appear that they were intending to implement the addendum. They stated that the notice was only intended to delete the requirement that commission approval of the addendum was a condition precedent to the obligations under either the ESA or the PPA. NMAREA stated that because the commission had not approved the addendum, both the ESA and the PPA needed to be amended to remove that condition precedent per section 17.3 of each of those agreements, so as to avoid termination of the ESA and the PPA, which would have been harmful to the benefits that the state's economy from the data center expansion would see. For these reasons, NMAREA concluded that the agreement to waive the condition precedent to obtain commission approval of the addendum didn't violate a regulatory principle and was not an attempt by PNM to evade or otherwise skirt the commission's authority to approve amendments to the special services contract and the company's filed rates. Staff stated in its response that it reviewed the final order and the notice, and that they agreed that it did the deletion of the waiver provision in the ESA and the PPA without any explanation by PNM did create confusions to PNM's intent regarding the amendments since the commission had rejected the addendum. Staff recommended that PNM address the confusion, and staff stated that if PNM's if the intent of the notice was solely to comply with the terms of the final order and amend the PPAs and the ESA to reflect the 50 megawatt size of the energy storage facility, then PNM should say that. And staff believe that there should be a sworn affidavit confirming this position. And staff concluded that if PNM filed such a response, no additional action would be needed in this case. Consequently, PNM did file its reply and did do what staff recommended. It filed an affidavit, and it affirmed that the amendments to ESA and the PPA filed with the notice were intended to serve only one purpose, which is to conform the ESA and the PPA to the final order, because the final order rejected that ESA as filed, but approved an ESA in the amount of 50 megawatts. So that they had to make that change in the ESA from 100 to 50. In addition, PNM acknowledged that the addendum was rejected in the final order. However, PNM stated it was necessary to implement the final order to amend the ESA and the PPA to waive the condition precedent to these agreements. The waiver, PNM affirmed, does not indicate in any way that PNM is implementing the addendum. PNM confirms that it will not implement the addendum unless it's approved by the commission in a future proceeding. And PNM also affirmed that they're just waiving the condition precedent of commission approval so that they can move forward with the ESA and the PPA. And it does not in any way waive the requirement for commission approval of an addendum before it could take effect. PNM also affirmed that it does not have the ability to waive commission approval of the addendum because such approval is required by the Public Utility Act, sections 6287B and C. For this reason, the proposed order would adopt and accept PNM's reply dated October 22nd, 2021. And I stand for questions.
The commissioners, questions, comments?
Mr. Chair, I think Judy just really explained that very well, and I would move to approve the order.
Second, under discussion, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair.
Terrific.
Well, I'm just certainly glad to see that we received a response from PNM that clarified, their intent with respect to moving forward with this energy storage agreement and the 2 purchase power agreements for the Facebook data center. But I do want to say in general, I think this commission recognized the importance of this project in approving it going forward with a slight change in the battery storage agreement. And we recognize the value of the Facebook third phase expansion to the economy there in Las Lunas and the greater Valencia County. And the jobs that it generates. And so I think this decision is proof positive that this commission is doing all it can to improve the regulatory environment here in the state. I think some people may have mixed emotions about the regulatory environment, but I think in this decision and in this case, it clearly indicates that the entire commission and the agency do everything it can to improve the regulatory environment. So I commend my colleagues for approving this project to go forward, and I, for one, and am happy that it's going forward. I think we were briefed that Facebook has invested, I think, almost $1 billion in the combined initial construction and the 2 subsequent phases of expansion. So I think this is good for the area of Las Lunas, and it's good for the state of New Mexico. And I think the consequential renewable energy projects from the Facebook data center have really catalyzed the development of renewable energy in central New Mexico. So I think this is a really good outcome. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comments before we vote? I'll make just a quick comment here. Well, actually, I'll wait till a vote and then I'll make a comment. Let's do this in the appropriate order. Mike, would you please take the roll?
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman.
Aye.
The order is approved.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the vote is 5-0 approving the order.
Thank you, Michael. So I just wanted to, number one, just say ditto to Commissioner Maestas' comments, and thank you to PNM and Facebook for responding to the Commission's needs on this one. It seems to me the parties may come back, given all the complication and misunderstanding around their proposal, their previous proposal on the addendum, and come back with a clarified explanation of it at some point, or during a rate case, or before a rate case, which would be fine. Anyway, the utilities like to the parties would like to do that. If they're going to do that, I just wanted to make a couple quick suggestions that might help if you decide to re-present. Number one would be to create more clarity around that production contribution figure, how it's calculated and why it's calculated that way. And the second thing would be to look at the idea of, is it appropriate to remove 100% of the production contribution charges to Facebook for adding a battery, given that folks are telling us now that you can't cost effectively go to renewables on more than 75% of the energy. If that's the case, should we be getting rid of more than 75% of the production contribution? So those are two issues that I don't know the answer to, but that if you come back to us, if you address them, it might provide the clarity that allows us to make a decision on that specific rate making treatment. So anyway, thanks to all parties, and I'm glad we're moving ahead on this. And we're glad to have Facebook here and PNM working with us on it. Any other comments from commissioners before we move on? Okay, we're on to discussion and potential action. And that's in the matter of a commission inquiry into the impacts of the global supply chain disruptions on utilities and provision of services to ratepayers. And Commissioner Maestas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to really mention in great detail what's already in the order, but the reason for bringing this to the commission is based on our previous discussions surrounding the supply chain issues that have at least that was communicated to us that will potentially delay the replacement power projects for the San Juan generating station, and as a consequence, may interfere or reduce PNM's reserve margin for summer of 2022. But I think the greater issue is, now it's very apparent that these global supply chain issues are affecting everything, not just materials for renewable energy projects. It's really gonna, and it sounds like these delays are gonna last into the better part of next year. And so consistent with our discussions is I think as a commission, it would be good for us to inquire with the other utilities besides PNM to get some information from them whether the global supply chain delays are interfering with services to their customers and also interfering with any projects they might have to improve services or increase renewable energy delivery to their ratepayers. And so that's what this is, Mr. Chair. It's just simply identifying all the regulated utilities and asking them a few questions regarding any potential issues that may affect service delivery to their ratepayers as a consequence of the global supply chain issues. And with that, I stand for questions, Mr. Chair.
Commissioners.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Byrd.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing this up, Commissioner Maestas. I'm curious, what problem do we plan to solve by doing this?
Well, it's not really a problem to solve. It's to gather additional information regarding impacts to utility operations due to the global supply chain issues. So there's really not a problem. I think we've seen the global supply chain issue manifest itself in the form of a real problem that's affecting the replacement power projects for PNM, but I for one cannot imagine that only PNM is being impacted by these global supply chain issues. And so I just think it's incumbent upon us to gather additional information to see if there are any other similar adverse impacts due to these supply chain issues by other utilities besides PNM.
I think that's a categorical yes. And I've asked this question anytime we ask companies to pull somebody from their regular routine and respond to a request, is what is the value of the report they provide? We know there's supply chain issues and it is a problem. Regardless of your business, it's an issue with my business. It's ridiculous what doesn't show up on some weeks and some months, and then the next week or month it'll be something else you can't get. But we're asking them to spend time, money, or time, talent, and treasure, if you will, to provide information that we know is going to be, yeah, we're having difficulties finding this or that at this time, and who knows what the future is going to hold. But we have no authority to change that. And so what value does this report provide other than what the circumstances on the ground are today? Because next month or next year, it'll be different. Bringing up the awareness there is value in that, hey, we have an issue that needs to be addressed and it's causing problems nationwide. But I think everybody knows that too. So again, I understand what you're doing. I don't see a long-term value. There's nothing that we can do as a commission that changes. If they can't get components for their transformers, we can't change that. And it's an issue that we're going to have to deal with.
Mr. Chair, if I could respond.
Yes, sure, go ahead.
It's not just, I think, gathering information. If you look at question 4 or question D in the order, it asks, what steps are you taking to ensure your ability to provide utility services to ratepayers in the face of supply chain disruptions and supply shortages? So if they agree that there are impacts, right, to their utility services, we want them to let us know what's your mitigation plan. And so we're not trying to be intrusive, but we're trying to get a handle on this, these supply chain issues statewide, and see what's being done in the form of mitigation.
Other commissioner discussion? Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Commissioner Hall, go ahead.
Well, I appreciate Commissioner Bird's comments. Everybody's busy. Companies are busy, especially if they're struggling to perform without adequate materials to work with due to supply chain problems. But I think it's just better to have some sort of information as an agency for purposes of how we approach what our job with respect to regulating the utilities. I guess I'm just a believer in seeking information, and the better we understand the commercial environment that companies that operate in our states exist in, then the better we can function as regulators. Yes, compiling and putting information together is a burden on the companies, but I don't know. We live in an electronic age. I think it's probably not. I don't know what sort of a burden. I don't know. To be honest, I don't know how much of a burden it would be, but I do think that as regulators, we have a duty to be as informed as we can be, not just about the narrow focus, the narrow legal focus, for example, of cases before us, but we need to understand what's happening in all aspects of the industries we regulate, including the supply chain. So I think it's a worthwhile endeavor to try to get this information. And we don't know whether it'll change our actions, but I think since it holds the possibility, because it's more information that we don't have now, then I think it's probably in our best interest to get information. We can make better decisions that way. So I would support it.
Okay, and other commissioner comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
I think our job as commissioners is to fill in the gaps. There were laws that were passed recently. There's holes in the laws. So our job in the utility environment is to fill in the gaps. And yes, I would support it because we will have that information when the time comes, when the case is before us, to make a decision on the future of resource replacement decisions. So I would support it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. I too support this. And I think, you know, we know with P&M that they've got some issues and they need to take some actions. And as a commission, we need a heads up on what they're thinking of doing. We don't want to get caught by surprise at the last minute if there happen to be any issues with their plans. And, you know, I think to the extent that that's true for other utilities that we regulate, we would ask the same. And this is just the way I think of asking everybody to give us a heads up if they need to make some changes in plans and changes in resources and resource acquisition as a result of the supply chain issues. And I would hope that in responding to this order, which it sounds like we will pass, that the utilities would understand that that's what we're after. And if they focus their efforts on being sure they answer that question, that, you know, they can address it in a way that minimizes the burden. And that's what we're after. And if utilities answer that question, and Joe, if you disagree, let me know. If they do that, then we'll be in good shape. So we're not meaning to create a whole bunch of bureaucratic work that's unnecessary here.
Chair,
All right, with it, go ahead, Commissioner Maston.
just some final comments is that I know at the outset of developing our 2-year work plan, we all made a commitment to be a proactive agency instead of a reactive agency. And we all saw how P&M of their own volition came to us to let us know of these delays. And so I just think it just begs the question, well, what's the situation across the state? And I think that we need to do our due diligence to avoid any other, you know, potential emergencies and assist utilities with planning to address these emergencies that may arise as a consequence of these supply chain issues. For example, just chip readers, or not readers, but chips, you know, the smart chips, there's a massive shortage of those. Simple truck transportation is severely curtailed. So I just think getting the utilities to answer 5 questions to give us some insight into what they're experiencing it's proactive, and it may identify any looming issues that we can help them address well in advance of any anticipated emergencies. I think it's prudent, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Commissioner Byrd.
I don't disagree with what you guys are saying, but I guess my perspective is different. And let me give you what I've seen. Early on, brass barrels were unavailable. That lasted for about a month and a half. And then PVC in March became unavailable. You couldn't get PVC. For 6 months now, I haven't been able to get wood rods. There was a brief time when I couldn't get solar panels. For some reason, they were stuck on a ship, I guess, and nobody had solar panels. So what has not been available has changed month to month and continues to change, except for wood rods. It's crazy. And supposedly they're made in Mexico. I don't know how they got stuck on a ship, but apparently they did. So my perspective is absolutely things are being affected. You can't hardly go to a store now that you don't see a space on the aisle or something is missing that used to be there all the time. And so I know there's going to be shortages of certain items. I know that it's going to change month to month. I understand what you're saying is that, well, then we need to know that they're taking actions. Sometimes you just, I have faith in our companies in that they're going to do the best they can for their customers because that's their mission. And so they do whatever they have to do to keep the power running, or the gas running, whatever their business is. And so I again will state, I understand what you're saying. I don't see that there's a value. There's not any kind of information that's going to change that we get that changes the outcome in the long run. And so there's a cost benefit that I just don't see paying off. There's a cost to getting this information with very little benefit. That doesn't mean I won't vote aye because I support the effort. I know what you're saying. I'm trying to get someone to tell me where's the benefit that's going to offset the cost.
So Commissioner Byrd, I guess my thought is that in the way that utilities respond to this, is that the commission doesn't need to hear about issues that are immaterial and will not affect customer service and reliability. We just need to hear the things that are material impacts. And I would hope that this order be taken in that spirit. And, it doesn't help the commission for us to be buried in a lot of unnecessary details that don't have an impact on customer service. We just need to hear the significant material issues. And I think that's the spirit of what we're asking for here. And if we do that, then we can hopefully satisfy the commission's requirements without creating the burdens that you as a small businessman only have a very acute understanding of that maybe the rest of us don't. So anyway.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would just follow up on that a little bit. It's very interesting to hear what Commissioner Byrd says. And I was realizing it's because he has a business and he faces these challenges every day. But those of us who aren't similarly situated, maybe don't get it as clearly. But in any case, I would be real interested to understand what are the challenges. And as you say, they only need to be the material challenges that relate to our scope of authority over the agency, over the utilities. But I would just like to understand their problems better. So
any other discussion?
That's it.
I would move the order. Do we have a second?
Second.
And Mike, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
Orders approved by a vote of 5-0.
And Commissioner Byrd, thank you for always keeping us alert to maybe when we're overreaching or creating burdens that we shouldn't. And hopefully the utilities will respond in a way that doesn't create too much of a burden in this case. So,
Right, I agree. And I just want to make sure we're thinking about both sides.
yeah, and I appreciate that your willingness to always bring it up, and it's good.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Yes, I would like to conclude by saying that the legislature, you know, in the recent Water and Natural Resource Committee meeting, they looked at PRC Commission leadership to give or provide information about how every energy issue are being addressed. And it's good for our staff members to learn more. We're also learning more. And one legislator in particular compared two companies, a company in the eastern part of New Mexico and how they look at P&M. So it's a good resource to listen in that committee meetings. And I think the commission is the proper place to address it and to call for additional information. And I think that's what we did today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. And thank you, Commissioner Maestas, for putting this together and bringing it up. And I wanted to mention last week when we put this issue on the agenda, I'd said I hadn't gotten a response from P&M when I'd made a more informal request for updates. And actually, I got home that afternoon and looked at my phone, and suddenly 10 phone messages from the prior week had shown up on my phone that weren't there. I have no idea what happened. But one of them was a message from Mark Fitton over at P&M, where indeed he had responded and said he wanted to see what we would do with the commission order. And he was asking me, well, should I do anything? I gave him a call back immediately and apologized for saying that we hadn't heard a response, but I was able to blame my phone. And so I just wanted to let folks know P&M was not dodging us in any way, shape, or form. And Mark had made a good faith effort to keep discussing the issue. So just that clarity on that issue. So thank you, P&M, for trying to get back to us.
Mr. Chair.
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'd just like to corroborate your statement about your phone. Mine has certainly taken over what I read and what I don't. And I've just discovered there's an elaborate process to find emails that are stolen. Otherwise, I mean, they're not stolen, but they're incarcerated, even from other commissioners in other states. I've had those. The phone is protecting me from emails like that. So you're not alone. You're not the Lone Ranger on that.
So Sarah, can you put the agenda back up for us, please? Thank you. All right. Uh-oh. We're on to item 10 here. And I'm just charging through if you guys are okay with it, because I think we're near the end here.
I'm good.
Good. So we're on to the 20-205 UT in the matter of the temporary moratorium on residential utility disconnections during the time period COVID-19 pandemic emergency orders are in effect as authorized by 1795-60, 1710-650, and 1712-760 NMAC. And Joseph and Judy, please take us through it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me just kick this off. In our last meeting, we were briefed on the anticipated higher natural gas prices by the New Mexico Gas Company. And I started, or at least I mentioned, kind of the confluence of all these issues coming together, the issues being the high cost of natural gas, the continued high amount of ratepayers that are facing disconnection, the status, the questions surrounding available financial assistance for renters and homeowners with their arrearages of their utility accounts. And so I really felt that it's important for us to, as a commission, to talk about the current state of the arrearages stemming from the pandemic. And I realize, the order that we had in place regarding the moratorium on disconnections, it's expired for both rural electric co-ops and investor-owned utilities. But if you all have studied kind of the trends in the monthly compliance reports that have been sent by the investor-owned utilities and rural co-ops, what I'm seeing is the investor-owned utilities down south, whose service areas are down south, are still experiencing a lot of difficulties with their ratepayers. If you look at Southwestern Public Services, the combined total delinquencies in the utility accounts has not yet peaked. We see September of 21 with a high of a combined arrearage of almost 14 million. And the average residential arrearage eligible for disconnection is at an all-time high of $2,286. And if you look at El Paso Electric, another, Southern investor-owned utilities, it seems that the worst may have peaked in August in terms of combined total delinquencies and total value of arrearages for all delinquent accounts. I think on the other side, I think of the spectrum, Zia Natural Gas is, I think, by far the best. They have drastically reduced the total number of customers subject to termination. I think the high in January was 3,009, and it's now, as of September, there were only 231 residential customers subject to termination. So I'm not going to go through the other reports, but I wanted to maybe present the extreme circumstances regarding the state of ratepayers across the state as a consequence of the pandemic. And as you all know, our moratorium essentially expires on November 15th, and that was by design because November 15th coincides with the beginning of the LIHEAP moratorium. But the big question, I think, is of all those customers that are experiencing large arrearages and subject to disconnection, how many are protected by LIHEAP? And so I know that some of you are down on, requiring additional information from utilities, but I think it's time for us to perhaps visit our current order with respect to the moratorium on disconnections and see if we need to step in and provide any assistance, or if we should just continue to leave this kind of on autopilot and let the utilities deal with these ratepayers that are subject to disconnection. So I think that is the ultimate question. I'll ask Judy to see if I really left anything out. We did include a table, and it's a snapshot in time based on some of the reports of how many folks have been disconnected and how many have been reconnected. But I think the context is much better if you look at the monthly compliance reports, because you can see what the trends have been, when, whether or not the worst is over for certain ratepayers in utility service areas. But what I can glean from these is Southwestern Public Service and EPE still have a lot of work to do to help bring these number of accounts down that are subject to disconnection and collect on those arrearages. So I guess, Judy, you're more familiar than anyone with our current order. What can we do? Is there anything that we can do to evaluate this situation and determine if there's anything else we can do to help? I did have my assistant inquire with the Department of Finance Administration about the availability of the Emergency Rental Assistance Program funds, and apparently the state has been given more time to obligate those funds. So it's been slow going, but I just wanted to tee this up because I just think we should be aware leading into the LIHEAP moratorium period that starts on November 15th in terms of what else can we do to help. Judy.
Yes, thank you for that introduction, Commissioner Maestas. And you are correct that with respect to the rural electrics moratorium, the temporary emergency moratorium was lifted on May 5th. And for the investor-owned utilities, it was lifted on August 12th. All utilities were encouraged to enter into installment agreements and not to have them ending sooner than November 15th, which is when the moratorium. I'd like to point out that our rule that pertains to the winter moratorium is in 17.5.410.30. It's entitled Winter Moratorium Protections. And it states, and I'll read part of it because I think it's important to your question.
Excuse me, Judy, could you tell me that site again? I'd like to look at it.
Yes, it's 17.5.410.30. A, unless requested by the residential customer, no utility shall discontinue or disconnect service to a residential customer during the heating season for non-payment of the residential customer's utility bill if the utility receives notice that the residential customer meets the qualifications of LIHEAP as determined by the administering authority for the current heating season. And this is the important part, 1, the residential customer has no past due charges on November 15th of the current heating season, or the residential customer has a settlement agreement or an installment agreement with the utility for amounts other than those owing from the prior heating season. And the residential customer continues to make the agreed upon payments under the settlement or installment agreement. So as you know, the administering agency for LIHEAP is the Human Services Department, and every state has its own criteria. I think we could figure out how many LIHEAP eligible customers, but I don't know if there's any way for the utility to even figure that out, who is LIHEAP eligible and has not applied, because that might be one way to assist customers, is to, publicize the fact that they need to go in and get their LIHEAP eligibility, and also to publicize that they need to have an installment agreement and be making the agreed upon payments. Other than doing those two things, the commission theoretically, and I'm not stating I'm recommending it, these are all policy decisions, but I'm just stating that it's an option to change the winter moratorium rule on an emergency basis for this winter and just institute a winter moratorium for all customers. That would have to be based on the fact that the governor's emergency order is still in effect. So I see those as a variety of options that the commission could do.
Other commissioner questions, thoughts? Personally, I'm super concerned about this because
Yeah.
we also have the fuel costs going up. So the fuel charges on bills are going to go up regardless of what the rates are. And I think we're all aware that natural gas prices have just about doubled recently, I guess. And we also have dockets in place that there are proposals for some significant rate increases, particularly for residential customers. So it really is kind of a perfect storm of all this stuff coming together. And, you know, I know I'd like to look into things we can do to help folks take advantage of programs that are already in place that they're not taking advantage of. The rental assistance and the utility assistance. It's just so hard to get the word out. But, you know, maybe we should go back and take another look at what we need to do with the moratoriums. It's a more drastic step, and I know balances, you know, build up for the utilities, but you know, we need to take a look at all stakeholders here and how it's impacting them. Joe, did you have any, Commissioner Maestas? Sorry, I get informal. Commissioner Maestas, do you have any particular avenues you'd like us to investigate prior to an upcoming meeting and in terms of recommending action items?
Well, I've been getting some feedback on this issue. As an example, Mr. Chair, I received some feedback stating anyone not covered by LIHEAP are covered by American Rescue Plan funds, but it's contingent upon members applying. And so there are some protections, but as we've seen, ratepayers by nature are not proactive in seeking assistance, whether it's shareholder funds for pandemic relief or federal funds through Department of Finance and Administration. I think the other issue too is we were briefed that there was about $55 million in pandemic relief for homeowners. Again, this is different from the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, as the ERAP is only for renters, but a different agency is administering the assistance for homeowners. And I'm not sure whether it's even begun yet. And I know that there's a lot of homeowners out there that are experiencing economic distress and facing disconnection. And so I realize this may be taking a step back, but I didn't anticipate that the situation would continue to get worse despite all the assistance and funding and interim protections that we included in our order. So I'd like to know, for one, you know, who's facing disconnection that's not eligible for LIHEAP. What is the status of the pandemic relief funds for homeowners being administered by Mortgage Finance Authority? What's going on down south? Again, the southern New Mexico ratepayers, maybe it's just the warm climate, but I still point to Southwestern Public Service. They haven't peaked yet in terms of their combined total delinquency as of September. And I think El Paso Electric, they peaked in August, if that is in fact a true peak. P&M seem to have peaked in terms of the residential arrearage subject to termination. They peaked in May of this year, but the average residential arrearage seems to have peaked in August. And so I'm just looking at the trends, Mr. Chair, and my colleagues, that this is still very distressing. And I don't know what the future holds for these people that are facing disconnection. And obviously, we all know that they probably, realize that it's a much higher priority to put food on the table and buy medications and pay rent over paying for their utility bills. And so, the moratorium on disconnections has been lifted. So there is a sense of urgency, but the numbers are not showing that. They're not revealing that these combined delinquency amounts and the number of accounts facing disconnection are going down appreciably.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Mr. Chair, oh, sorry.
I'll make this comment, then on to you, Commissioner Hall.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if utilities know who's behind, and we have these programs which not only work for the consumer, but they also reduce the arrearages that a utility faces. It's a win all around. And I just wonder if there are ways to administer these programs within the state that, instead of waiting for the utility customer to come to us, that through the utilities, we can go to them and get these funds distributed appropriately. Do you know, Commissioner Maestas, before we get to Cynthia Hall, if there's been any work done along those lines?
No, I think the last, we heard was that they significantly streamlined the process for requesting federal funds through the ERAP program by means of a very simple one-page attestation in lieu of documentation. And then the availability is a revelation, because I had heard that the federal funds were not going to be made available past the end of the calendar year. And so I would like to know, for one, what the status is of the administration of all pandemic-related assistance to utility customers facing disconnection or experiencing arrearages. And then the only other issue I had, Mr. Chairman, is I think we had ongoing protections for ratepayers in our order. One was, if they're actively seeking federal funds, they're not subject to disconnection. Number two, if they're on a payment plan, that they're protected from disconnection. But I'm wondering, maybe Judy, do those protections expire on November 15th for non-LIHEAP customers?
I believe, and let me look at the orders, that the installment agreements were not supposed to end before November 15th. But if they end after November 15th, you have to be current. So I don't think that those protections go beyond November 15th. Unless otherwise agreed to by the utility in the installment agreement. The utility had flexibility in arranging the installment agreements. So if they did make them longer than November 15th and a person was current on making payments, then they would not be subject to disconnect. So there's no one answer. I would say it depends on the utility's agreement with the customer and whether or not the customer is complying with the terms of the agreement.
Thanks, Judy. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I kind of went off on a tangent on you there.
No problem. I'm thinking it might not be a bad idea for the commission to inquire with utilities if there's a way that they can make customers more aware and of what they could. And I mean, it could be as the emailing or snail mailing an application, an affidavit to these folks who are eligible for these programs, but not doing uptake, and just really putting it in front of their faces. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but maybe it's something we should be inquiring with the utilities about in a more official manner, just from a letter from the commission on that, and that we might have the utilities at next week's meeting or an interim meeting, just to kick around some ideas. I think on this issue they've been pretty forthcoming, and maybe there's some ideas we can come up with that we can better utilize at least the funds that are out there that are not getting taken up, and that at a minimum, and maybe some other stuff as well. I don't know, maybe extending a moratorium in certain more specific circumstances for struggling customers. But with that, I'll go to Commissioner Hall.
Mr. Chair, I was just going to mention, I think we, we have authority over quality of over service, of the quality of service that utilities provide. I mean, they have to provide adequate service to customers. And to that extent, I think the sort of things you've described about having utilities come in and maybe, conduct stronger outreach to their customers falls within our jurisdiction. But I think we have to be mindful of what we can and cannot do. So I think if we look at it in that kind of a lens, I agree. We should have the utilities come in and explain to us why there is this, disconnect, if you will, between what their customers are doing and what they really need to do.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we can, instruct. I guess I'm not too sure how we could change that scenario if customers are not on their own taking some initiative to reach out to the to do whatever they need to do to get reconnected. We've heard discussions about this before, but I think it bears hearing again and have the utilities come in and explain to us why their customers are not reconnecting the way they had been connected before. I mean, we just need insight. And I think just having them come in and talk to us might be the most efficient way to do it. But I don't feel like we really understand why it's happening. And if we don't understand why it's happening, we can't really clarify for ourselves what we can legally do. So I support asking them to come in and just make a brief presentation, about what's going on.
Judy, go ahead.
I know that previously in this docket, we did hold a workshop. I think it was either at the end of January, end of February. And at that time, a lot of utilities did come in and express their situations and provided suggestions. And perhaps that would be a step that the commission could take prior to issuing an order in this docket, and in support of Commissioner Hall's point that without understanding, it would be hard to fashion an order.
I guess what I would suggest is, commissioners, would we do this as part of an open meeting, or will we do this as a separate meeting? suggestion?
Mr. Chair, I'd suggest that it be a separate, a separate activity, and that we also invite the Department of Finance and Administration to brief us on the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and also invite Mortgage Finance Authority to give us a brief presentation on the status of the federal funds for homeowners that are experiencing economic distress due to the pandemic. And then I think too, I think it's good for us to maybe do a soft inquiry and ask those utilities that have voluntarily made available private shareholder funds for pandemic assistance, and see if they're willing to continue to make those funds available for residents experiencing arrearages in their utility accounts.
You're talking about leftover balances?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. My thought is that it might not be a bad idea to have all of those parties together at the same meeting, because the folks that are administering those programs might be able to give some insight to utilities on things they can do that they hadn't thought they could do. Make any sense?
Yes, makes sense to me.
So in terms of setting a day, can we do that right now? Setting a time?
Well, I do think we should do it before November 15th. I realize time is very short. We have a lot of other things going on, but maybe I can work with Judy, and if I can maybe get other commissioners to submit questions that we may pose in a workshop, like how many folks facing disconnection are not LIHEAP eligible, as an example. I think that would help to kind of prepare everybody to participate in this workshop and give us feedback before kind of the expiration of protections, especially for non-LIHEAP customers.
Mr. Chair, in connection with that last comment by Commissioner Maestas, I thought that table was very helpful as far as it went. I was wondering why we didn't have more stuff on it, like from the utilities you were talking about at the beginning of your presentation, Commissioner Maestas, and maybe you could expand that table to give the the LIHEAP information as well. I mean, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and that just sort of laid out the stark numbers very quickly. Be my suggestion.
I agree. It doesn't offer the right context. I think Judy has a question.
Yeah, it looks like it.
I was informed by Isaac that New Mexico Gas Company is wanting to provide some information that it believes would assist the commission. Is the commission interested in hearing from Gas Company?
Just right now?
Yes.
Yeah, please, come on.
Sure.
Tom, you're just here to brag, aren't you?
No.
You're so successful, you're just trying to rub it in.
No, I've listened to the discussion. And so when I saw this on the agenda, I thought it was more specifically directed towards us as a result of last week's meeting. But hearing the discussion today, I think we would just participate in the workshop. That sounds to me to be the way to go. And so, no, I've got nothing really to add. We were gonna put forth our numbers, but I think we should just do that along with everybody else when we have that meeting. I didn't understand exactly what was going to happen on this, and I didn't want to leave. We called Commissioner Maestas and asked him if we should be there. He said that would be fine, but I now see where this is going, and I think that this is the better way to go.
Okay, terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so Joe, why don't you and Judy try and set up a time? Commissioners Vicente Aguilar and Byrd, you have anything to add here that we're missing?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Yes, I think the commission has done everything that they could under our jurisdiction to inform utility ratepayers the different types of programs and funds that are available. I think the citizens that are in the senior citizen category, I think they are being hit the most. And the younger citizens, a majority of the people are working and they can work around their budget. But I don't think we are not doing enough for the senior citizen for the state of New Mexico. We could reach out to long-term aging program, which is another state agency, to see if we can coordinate some type of outreach with them. We're calling back utility companies. Utility companies, they are doing everything that they can according to their policies. They are lenient with new orders that we issue from our agency. But I believe that we are not seeing a state coordination about pandemic emergency preparedness. We are lacking that. I see that within the last 12 to 18 months, there's no coordination, which is out of our jurisdiction. And it is very sad. But I think the least that we can do is create a partnership with the senior citizen programs to see if we can work with a way to inform them what programs they qualify for. Maybe that's the least that we can do. But Judy will let me know if that is out of our jurisdiction. Thank you.
Well, I would think that we can always ask folks to come in and help coordinate. If they're willing, there's nothing to legally stop them. And if they want to decline an invitation, they can do that as well. But I think that's a very good suggestion. Judy?
Yes, I would agree. We can extend the invitation. And I think that frequently happens in government, is that a lot of different agencies have overlapping programs and jurisdiction, and coordination needs to, be more of a deliberate thought than just assuming that it's going to happen.
So, okay, good. So as we put something together, Commissioner Byrd, did you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Commissioner Fishman. First, just a question on that table. It shows that New Mexico Gas Company has more reconnections than disconnections. And then it's noted there, but there's no explanation provided at the bottom of the table. Do you know what the note is on that, Commissioner Maestas? Or Miss Amir, whoever put that together?
I didn't put it there. It was Christopher Hall, who is Commissioner Maestas' assistant.
Oh, he's here.
Christopher Hall, do you want to respond?
He did. He said maybe Mr. Go ahead.
I'm happy to. I'm sorry, there might be some background noise. I've got a sick kid at home with me today. Yeah, I just put that note in to make it clear that I did double check the numbers in the filings, that I did the math several times. I put it in a more professional tone in what I sent out this morning. And then, but I don't really know the actual reason or how that works, that there could be more reconnections than disconnections. And I don't know, obviously I don't have the authority to ask Mr. Dame, but since there is somebody from the New Mexico Gas Company here, if somebody wanted to ask him, perhaps he could inform us. And but thank you, Mr. Chairman and commissioners, and I stand for any further questions.
Oh, Mr. Chair, I've got a question of Christopher, of
Well,
Mr. Hall.
let's let Commissioner Byrd finish
Oh, sorry.
his line of thought there, and then we'll come to you.
Well, thank you. So I guess I'm changing rails now though, so I don't know if it's the same line of thought. I was just curious about that. So one of the other things that the utilities told us when they did come in and talk about the moratorium, they found that the best way to get people to pay the bill was when they sent them a disconnect notice. And that usually gets their attention, and they either come in and pay or try to figure out how to make payments. Maybe on that form, and I don't know that it isn't. I've been so blessed I haven't received a disconnect notice. I just get disconnected arbitrarily by our utility, but that's another issue.
Oh.
They maybe they could include language in there that simply states that if they feel they may qualify for assistance, contact these people, these organizations, and provide that contact information so that anybody who can qualify gets that information in their mail. If you're making your payments and everything's hunky-dory at your house, you don't need it, and the company doesn't need to spend the money telling you need it. But those who aren't making their payments probably do need it. And those are the ones we need to be reaching out to. And then that will limit the amount of extra burden and costs that companies are facing. So it's just a thought when we're formulating all this. And I'm glad you're still beating the bush there, Commissioner Maestas.
Thank you,
I
sir.
think that's a good thought for targeted outreach to the appropriate audience. Commissioner Hall. Commissioner Hall?
Yeah, let's see. I had a question for Christopher Hall about whether it would be would it be possible that New Mexico Gas just had new people connecting? I just wondered if you had any insight into that as a way of accounting for more numbers of what we're calling reconnections, but I wonder if there are any that are, new as opposed to reconnections.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Hall, Commissioners, the information I gathered was from their filings and was strictly, at least according to the information provided in the docket, regarding disconnections and reconnections from non-payment. So my understanding is that would not have applied to any, or rather any new connections would not have been included in that number based on, again, my reading.
Okay, well, it doesn't add up, does it? Thank you, though.
Okay, any further discussion needed here? Commissioner Maestas and Judy, you're going to come back to us with a date. And
make sure it's not the Golden Rainbow Room either. I want a good date.
Yeah, and I want California dates. So at any rate, you guys will come back to us with a calendar date, and get our sign on to it, and we'll pursue it from there. And I do think it's important, and I too was surprised by the numbers.
Will do, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
go ahead.
Does it make any sense to invite any members of the legislature or possibly reach out to the governor's office? I mean, maybe, I don't want to be hysterical about everything, but
so there might be someone from the governor's office, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's not the legislature's job to administer these programs, so I don't know if that helps much.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it sounds like there's sort of a limitation in what these programs can actually do. So it might, but I think there's merit in what Commissioner Byrd said about getting people's attention with a disconnect notice. It sounds kind of brutal, but it data seem to show that that's how people respond.
Well, but a disconnect notice with
Information.
about how they can get help.
Yeah.
So,
Or even information showing that, these were the number of disconnections and these are the number of reconnections. And where are you? You seem to be not trying to get reconnected and we want you back.
well, when we get the utilities in on this meeting, we'll have a chance to explore all these possibilities in more depth.
Yeah.
So thank you, Commissioner Mastis, for bird dogging this.
Thank you.
And Sarah, back to the agenda. Oh, okay. Number 10, designation of replacement member to serve on New Mexico Martin Luther King Jr. State Commission. Any volunteers?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Is that why Commissioner Maestas has it on the agenda?
I believe so.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you for appointing me to represent the Public Regulation Commission on the Martin Luther King Jr. State Commission. We just, in our last meeting, approved some significant bylaws changes to reform the commission itself, and I was the lead on that, so I'm very gratified and happy to do that and contribute. It's a wonderful commission, but the reason why I put this on the agenda is because the commission itself is still under a compliance order by the Office of the State Auditor, and as some of you may know, I'm running for the Democratic nomination to be the next state auditor, and I feel that I could be a part of a conflict of interest if a lot of ifs, if the compliance requirements remain unfulfilled until at least next year, until the primary election. So of course, if I were to be successful, I'd have to prevail in the primary and the general and would take the oath on January 1 of 2023. But I'm uncomfortable with the current conflict of interest, being a candidate and being a member of this commission. And so I'm just putting this on the agenda for discussion. If you look at the attachment, it has the statute regarding the Martin Luther King Jr. Commission. And we have a designated membership in there, and it's worded the chairman of the New Mexico State Corporation Commission or Public Regulation Commission or his designee. And so, Mr. Chairman, it's either you or a designee, and I'm asking all of you to consider replacing me with someone else because of this conflict of interest.
Commissioner, thoughts?
And it doesn't necessarily have to be a commissioner. I think that, assistants have served in that capacity in the past, but it's really up to the chair, I believe.
Okay. So I'm hearing silence, so I don't hear any volunteers to replace Commissioner Maestas there. Am I correct in that? Yeah, because I know we all have super busy schedules with all the rulemakings and everything else going on. Rate cases, having grid, blah, blah, blah. I guess what I'm going to do is let me beat the bushes a little bit and get back to folks with a couple ideas here. And I'll have them by our next meeting, next open meeting.
Sounds good, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and I appreciate your thoughtfulness on the conflict of interest here, Commissioner Maestas. And I will come up with something in the next week and put it in front of folks and be sure everyone's comfortable with it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let's get on to communications with Chief of Staff.
Going in and out of the camera there, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about that. Did it a couple extra times. Good morning or good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Nice to see you. When I started with the commission, I was a bit of a broken record in that all of my communications seemed to deal with the Bochum building. Since we're now moved in, I've moved on to sounding like a broken record and reporting on the commission technical advisory staff, which I know I did report to you on last week, but there have been a couple of developments. So, Mr. Chairman, the first level of sign off on the two commission technical advisory staff, the economist and the engineer, we have received the first level of sign off on those from the Department of Finance and Administration. So they're awaiting one more level of signatures there. We hope that will happen soon. I don't anticipate any issues with that, but we'll let you know if any issues do arise. I also wanted to report that Michael has formed two, I guess you would call them screening committees. Once those positions are advertised, we'll have two staff screening committees in place to go through the applications that we receive and hopefully get those down to a manageable number for the commission to interview. We also are in the process of developing the job postings for those positions. I'm hopeful that we will have those to the commission by this Friday for any input that you have. Again, that's for the engineer and the economist. Also learned this morning, Mr. Chairman, that we do have budget authority beginning in November for the third technical advisory position, which is an accounting position or somebody with utility accounting experience. So we will also begin a similar process of getting that prepared to send to DFA for sign off. So, you know, posting, as you know, Mr. Chairman, posting a position and actually getting to a point where you hire somebody are two very different things. But I just want to let you know that we are making progress on now 3 technical advisors for the commission. And it would be my hope, of course, the holidays will probably intervene and slow things down a little bit. But my hope is that we will be able to, assuming we have qualified applicants for the commission to consider, that you'll be able to do that before the end of the year. So that's the update on that, Mr. Chairman. Happy to answer any questions that you have on that, or any questions you have on any other matter pertaining to the staff. Thank you, Mr.
Chairman. Commissioners, any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
We'll start with Commissioner Hall and then Commissioner Maestas.
I just want to say, I think it's outstanding news. I'm really glad to hear that we're moving forward on those 3 positions. It makes me breathe easier already thinking about all the work we are embarking on. We've embarked on, are going to continue on. So it's not a moment too soon, and it's very welcome. And I'm just grateful for your efforts, Wayne. Thank you.
And Commissioner Maestas.
No, I just want to echo what Commissioner Hall said. This is fabulous news. It's something all of us have been really advocating for. And I think we're starting to hear this from legislators. I think they're understanding that, yes, it's one thing to have landmark energy-related legislation that's leading the country in a transition to a clean energy economy, but it's another to really invest on the implementation of it. And I think that the message is finally getting through. And I think Wayne had a successful hearing on the budget issues last week. I listened in on that, and I heard a lot of support from legislators with what, you know, Wayne and all of us are trying to do here. And then we have Mary Jane coming on board in November. So things are looking up.
And can you give us a quick update on the audit?
Mr. Chairman, we are, members of the commission, we are wrapping up the audit. We will have a exit conference this afternoon with the commission's external auditor. Once that rules have sort of changed over the last several years, I believe Renata's on, she'll correct me if I get them wrong, but once we've completed the exit conference, we will submit the draft audit to the Office of the State Auditor. It's due on Monday. We hope to get it in before Monday if possible. The state auditor will then begin a process of reviewing the draft audit. It does not become public until it has been reviewed and signed off by the Office of the State Auditor. That probably will take at least a month or so. Once the Office of the State Auditor has authorized the release of it, we will be bringing it back to the commission to review with the commission in an open meeting.
Okay, terrific. And later today, I was planning to sit in on that.
That's right.
In Santa Fe, and I'm gonna get into the office, and hopefully before I get there, I'll have read whatever their preliminary findings are. So,
and Mr. Chairman, generally for a governance body like a commissioner or board, the chair of the board or commission participates in that in both the entrance and the exit conference.
Right. Okay. Anything else for Wayne?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead. Oh, he was just saying thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Communications from General Counsel.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I just wanted to let you know that, as you know, the year is coming to a close in a brief 2 months. And with the current calendar we have for the meetings, we have 6 meetings left. And we have a number of cases that are going to be coming up as end of the year statutory, some with statutory deadlines, and others that are going to be coming up that I think the commission is going to want to address. So we are currently in the process of, I've reached out to the hearing examiners to try and find out what's coming down the pike and when we could expect it. And we're in the process of putting together a estimate of when we're going to get those on. So I just want to let you know that that's going to be coming to shortly.
Okay. Terrific. Thank you. We need that coming to the year end. It always seems to happen that way. That we have a bit of a crush. But anyway, anything in particular you want to tell us now about cases coming up, or just wait for the memo?
Wait for the memo.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. So are we going to be provided information about which cases are going to be coming up on which meetings, or is that too hard to plan out ahead for my?
Some of them we can give you that information. Others we're not quite sure yet because RDs haven't been issued yet. And we don't know what the exception periods are going to be.
Can you query the hearing examiners on that to see if they can guide you at all? Because I know for me, it would really help to know how to order my preparation.
I have reached out to them about that.
Okay. Whatever you can bake in there in terms of other information, it'd be nice. So thank you.
And that's it.
Thank you, Michael. Communications with commissioners.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Byrd.
Thank you. Just letting you guys know that I'm planning on attending the NARUC conference in Kentucky, the 7th through the 10th, I believe. It's
My God, we got you traveling. What is going on here? Commissioner Byrd.
I do eventually.
Okay, any other commissioner communication?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Commissioner Maestas.
when I mentioned all the members of the Community Solar Action Team, I left out Christopher Dunn. So he is also part of the Community Solar Action Team, and he was instrumental in giving us options on how the 200 megawatt cap could be allocated to the various investor-owned utilities. So I wanted to give Christopher a shout out. Also, I wanted to mention I attended the first ever Tribal Solar Economic Forum and made a brief, and I mean very brief, presentation on the status of community solar rulemaking. And I also attended the Climate Summit that just concluded yesterday. It was Monday and Tuesday of this week. And it was very, very interesting. And that's all I had, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, okay, Commissioner Hall.
Well, I just wanted to say a few things. Commissioner Maestas actually left me out. I did attend a couple of the meetings, but only a few of the workshops in the community solar rulemaking effort because, well, you know, it was interesting. I wanted to be part of the team, but I am stretched kind of thin between that and interconnection. But I'm just concerned about the any kind of adverse implications on success of the community solar rule in connection with the interconnection rule. But from the rollout of the rule, it looked very strong. So, but it was really very interesting and informative to be part of those few meetings. I forgot to mention, I had attended the Western Interconnect Reliability Advisory Board meeting a couple of weeks ago in San Diego in person. And that was very interesting insofar as the conversation was focused very largely on what is the best way to proceed in the West to get a handle on resource adequacy, cost allocation, all sorts of issues, and whether or not to have a regional transmission organization form independently of CAISO and SPP. There were presentations by CAISO, by SPP, by the Northwest Power Pool, and just a lot of productive discussion. And it was very thought-provoking, and I think the parties have gotten a lot more informed, and we continue to examine that question. But it was a step up in information, and with the ability to compare the effectiveness of the models so far. So it was well worth it. And I'm also thinking of attending online at least a couple of days of the NARUC meeting if possible, that Commissioner Byrd mentioned, but I can't attend the entire meeting, and I'm going to just do it online if I do it. So,
yep.
Thanks.
It's a real challenge coming up with a balance between collaborating and sharing resources and allowing each existing jurisdiction to exert control where it needs to. And there's no easy path and there's no one answer. So it'll be interesting how it all develops.
Well, it's interesting how the conversations move forward and how thoughts change. I was just reading an article yesterday that I don't know if I think might have been sent out to all the commissioners from, I forget the gentleman's name right now. He's been a witness in some of our cases. He's a former commissioner and now practices law in Denver, who was saying the RTO ISO model is just now no longer useful for purposes of integrating renewables into a grid, and it won't serve the grid of the future. And it was quite interesting.
Yep, I saw it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So that's my information.
Any other commissioner comments before we adjourn? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, very much.
See you guys. Have a good week.
Bye.
Take care.